The desert wind howled through the canyon like a wounded animal, carrying with it the taste of dust and desperation. The sun was dying behind the jagged peaks, painting the sky in shades of blood and copper that only the American frontier could produce. In the shadow of a crumbling ranch, an old barn stood alone against the elements, its weathered boards groaning under the weight of abandonment. Emma Sullivan pressed her back against the rotting wood, trying to make herself smaller, invisible. Her once white dress, a remnant from better days, was now the color of the road she'd traveled, brown with dirt, torn at the hem, stained with sweat and tears. She clutched a small canvas bag to her chest, containing the last of her worldly possessions, a broken comb, her mother's Bible with pages missing, and 3 dried biscuits she'd stolen from a pig trough 2 days prior. The town of Perdition lay 5 miles behind her, its lights beginning to flicker in the gathering darkness. She wouldn't go back. Couldn't. The memory of Mrs. Henderson's sneer was still fresh. "We don't need your kind here," the boarding house owner had spat, slamming the door in Emma's face. Your kind. The words echoed in the emptiness. Orphaned, penniless, and worst of all, rumored to have Indian blood from a grandmother nobody talked about. It didn't matter that it wasn't true. In Perdition, whispers became truth, and truth became a death sentence for a young woman alone. The barn offered little comfort. Holes in the roof let in slivers of fading light, and the smell of old hay mixed with horse dung and mold made her stomach turn. But it was shelter, and after 3 nights sleeping in ditches and under scraggly mesquite bushes, even this felt like luxury. Emma found a corner where the hay was thickest, though gray with age and crawling with insects. She spread her shawl, her mother's shawl, the last thing she had of her, and tried to arrange the straw into something resembling a bed. Hunger gnawed at her insides like a living thing. She thought about the biscuits, but decided to save them. Tomorrow. Always tomorrow. That's what Papa used to say before the fever took him, before Mama followed him 6 months later, before the bank took the house and the town took her dignity. The darkness came swift and complete, the way it does in the desert. With it came the sounds, coyotes yipping in the distance, the scuttle of rats in the corners, the creak of old wood settling. Emma pulled her knees to her chest, making herself into a ball of misery. Tears came then, hot and shameful. She was 22 years old, and this was her life, sleeping in a barn like livestock, unwanted and unloved. She must have dozed, because the sound of footsteps jolted her awake. Heavy footsteps, deliberate and unhurried. Her heart hammered against her ribs as a massive shadow filled the barn's entrance. The figure had to duck to enter, and when he straightened, Emma's breath caught in her throat. He was the largest man she'd ever seen, standing at least 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed to span the width of the doorway. In the moonlight streaming through the gaps in the roof, she could make out his features, strong, angular, unmistakably Apache. His hair was long, black as midnight, held back by a leather band. He wore a mixture of traditional dress and white man's clothing, buckskin pants, a cotton shirt, and boots that had seen many miles. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Emma's fingers dug into the straw, her body coiled to run, though she knew it would be futile. The Apache's dark eyes moved over her, taking in her pathetic corner, her torn dress, her tear-stained face. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep as thunder rolling across the plains, speaking English with careful precision. "Why are you sleeping in the barn?" The question was so unexpected, so simply asked, that Emma's fear momentarily gave way to confusion. She'd expected violence, or worse, not curiosity. Her voice cracked from disuse. She swallowed, tried again. "I have nowhere else to go." The Apache moved closer, and Emma saw that despite his intimidating size, his movements were graceful, controlled. He crouched down, still towering over her even in this position, this close. She could see scars on his arms, old wounds that spoke of battles survived. His face was weathered by sun and wind, putting him perhaps in his 30s, though it was hard to tell. "The town?" he asked, nodding in the direction of Perdition. Emma's laugh was bitter. "The town wants nothing to do with me. They say I'm..." She stopped, unable to repeat the slurs, the accusations. "White towns," the Apache said, and there was something in his tone, not quite sympathy, but understanding. "They fear what they don't understand, hate what they fear." He stood abruptly, and Emma tensed again, but instead of advancing on her, he moved to the barn entrance and looked out at the night. His profile was sharp against the stars, noble in a way that made her think of the illustrations in her father's books about ancient warriors. "You cannot stay here," he said without turning. "The barn belongs to Harlan Wade. He comes to check his remaining cattle every few days. He shoots first, asks no questions." Emma's heart sank. Of course, even this meager shelter would be denied her. She began to gather her pathetic belongings, wondering if she had the strength to walk further into the desert, wondering if it would be better to simply lay down and let the desert claim her. "You come with me." The words hung in the air. Emma looked up to find the Apache watching her, his expression unreadable. What?" "You come with me," he repeated, patient as stone. "My people's camp is a day's walk. You will have food, shelter, safety. But I'm white," she almost said, "the enemy. You are a woman sleeping in a barn," he said simply. "Alone, hungry. This is not right." Emma wanted to protest, wanted to maintain some shred of pride. But what pride was left? She was sleeping in filth, slowly starving, with nowhere to go and no one who cared if she lived or died. This stranger, this Apache who should have every reason to hate her kind, was showing her more kindness than any of her own people had in months. "I don't even know your name," she whispered. "Samuel Redhawk," he said, and she heard the weight of two worlds in that name. The Samuel for the white world he clearly knew how to navigate, the Redhawk for the world he came from. "My father thought it would help to have a white name. It didn't." Despite everything, Emma almost smiled at the dry humor in his voice. "Emma Sullivan." Samuel nodded once, decisively. "Come then, Emma Sullivan. The night is long and the desert is no place for the unprepared." She hesitated one last moment, looking around the barn that had been her would-be sanctuary. Then, gathering her courage along with her meager possessions, she stood on shaking legs. Samuel was already at the entrance, waiting with the patience of mountains. When she approached, he handed her a waterskin leather, beaded with intricate patterns. "Drink," he commanded gently. "We have far to go." The water was warm but clean, and Emma had to force herself not to gulp it all. As she handed it back, their fingers brushed, and she was surprised by the gentleness in hands that looked like they could snap a man in half. They stepped out into the desert night together, and Emma Sullivan, who had thought her life was ending in that barn, wondered if perhaps it was only beginning. The desert night wrapped around them like a cold blanket, and Emma found herself shivering despite the residual heat rising from the sand. Samuel walked ahead, his pace steady but not unkind, occasionally glancing back to ensure she followed. The moon hung fat and silver above them, casting strange shadows among the sagebrush and rocks. "Stay close," Samuel said, his voice carrying easily in the still air. "Night hunters prowl these paths." Emma quickened her step, her worn boots catching on stones and thorny plants. Every shadow seemed alive, every distant sound a threat. She'd heard stories of wolves, mountain cats, and worse things that hunted under darkness. But somehow, the massive figure ahead of her felt like a shield against all of it. They walked in silence for what felt like hours, the landscape shifting from flat land to rolling hills dotted with Joshua trees that looked like twisted hands reaching for the stars. Emma's legs burned. Her feet blistered in her thin boots. But she didn't complain. She'd lost the right to complain when she'd accepted help from a stranger, an Apache stranger. No less. "Here," Samuel said suddenly, stopping near a cluster of large rocks. "We rest, drink." He handed her the waterskin again, then pulled something from a pouch at his waist, dried meat, by the look of it. Emma's stomach cramped at the sight of food, and she had to stop herself from snatching it from his hand. "Venison," he explained. tearing off a piece for her. "Eat slowly." The meat was tough, salted, but it was the finest thing Emma had tasted in weeks. She chewed carefully, savoring each bite, while Samuel settled against a rock, his eyes scanning the darkness. "Why?" The question escaped before Emma could stop it. Samuel turned his dark gaze to her. "Why what? Why help me, your people, my people? We're—" She couldn't finish, couldn't voice the ugly truth of the violence between their races. "Enemies?" Samuel supplied, and there was something almost amused in his tone. "Yes, my grandfather was killed by white soldiers. My sister—" He paused, jaw tightening. "Many stories of blood between us." "Then why?" He was quiet for so long Emma thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "When I was young, maybe 12 winters, I was hunting alone, foolish. A rattlesnake bit me. Far from camp, I thought I would die there, become food for buzzards." He shifted, moonlight catching the planes of his face. "A white woman found me, a settler's wife. She could have left me, or called her husband to finish what the snake started. Instead, she sucked the poison from the wound, took me to her cabin, nursed me until I could walk again." Emma stared at him, trying to picture the scene. A white woman saving an Apache boy, going against everything she'd been taught to fear. "Her name was Mary Connor." Samuel continued. "Her husband beat her when he found out, but she told me something before I left. She said, 'We are all just people trying to survive. Boy, don't let the hate of others poison your heart.'" He looked at Emma directly. "So, when I see a woman sleeping in a barn like an animal, I remember Mary Connor. I choose to see a person, not an enemy." Tears stung Emma's eyes, and she blinked them away furiously. She'd cried enough for one night. They resumed walking as the first hints of dawn touched the eastern sky, painting it in pale pink and gold. The landscape had changed again, becoming rockier, with deep arroyos cutting through the earth. Samuel led her along paths she never would have found alone, through passages between rocks that seemed to open just for him. "Your camp," Emma ventured, needing to fill the silence with something other than her labored breathing. Will I be welcome?" Samuel's expression was unreadable. "Some will welcome you, others will not. But my word carries weight. You will be safe." "And what am I to be? A prisoner? A servant? A guest?" he said simply. "Until you decide otherwise." The sun was fully up when they crested a ridge, and Emma gasped at the sight below. The Apache camp spread across a hidden valley, sheltered by towering red rocks on 3 sides. Perhaps 30 dwellings, a mix of traditional wickiups and more permanent structures, clustered near a stream that wound through the canyon like a snake. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and she could see people moving about their morning tasks. "My people," Samuel said, and there was pride in his voice. As they descended, Emma became aware of eyes upon them. Children stopped playing to stare. Women at their work looked up, expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. Men paused in their activities, hands moving instinctively to weapons. Samuel spoke in Apache, his voice carrying authority. Emma caught her name among the unfamiliar words, heard the questioning tones of those who answered him. An older woman approached, her face weathered but her eyes sharp as obsidian. She and Samuel exchanged what sounded like heated words, gesturing toward Emma. "My aunt, Rebecca Crowfeather," Samuel explained in English, though the woman clearly understood, her eyes narrowing. "She says bringing you here is foolish, that you will bring trouble." Rebecca spoke again, rapid-fire Apache that sounded like scolding. Samuel's jaw tightened, but his response was measured, firm. Finally. Rebecca threw up her hands and stalked away, but not before giving Emma a look that could have curdled milk. "Come," Samuel said, leading her to a wickiup set slightly apart from the others. "This was my sister's. It's empty now. You can rest here." The dwelling was small but clean, with blankets folded neatly and baskets arranged along the walls. It smelled of sage and sweet grass. so different from the barn stench that Emma felt dizzy with relief. "I'll bring food and water," Samuel said. "Rest, you're safe here." But as he left, Emma caught sight of the faces watching her through the dwelling's entrance. Suspicious, angry, afraid. She wondered if Samuel's protection would be enough, wondered what she'd traded one form of isolation for another. A young woman entered, perhaps Emma's age, carrying a water bucket and cloth. Her face was round and pretty, but her expression was cold. "I am Mary. Speak softly," she said in accented English. "Samuel says I'm to help you." The resentment in her voice was clear. "I don't want to be a burden," Emma said quickly. "I can work. I can—" "You can do nothing," Mary interrupted. "You're weak, soft. You know nothing of our ways." She set the bucket down hard, water sloshing. "Samuel should not have brought you here. You'll bring the white soldiers down on us." "I won't, I promise. No one even knows I'm gone. No one cares. They always care when one of theirs is with us," Mary said bitterly. "Even one they throw away like garbage. They'll come, and people will die, and it will be your fault." She left before Emma could respond, and Emma sank onto the blankets, exhausted and overwhelmed. Through the Wiki-Up's entrance, she could see the camp going about its business, could see Samuel's tall form near the central fire, speaking with an elderly man who must be a chief or elder. She'd escaped one prison only to find herself in another. It seemed, but at least here, someone had shown her kindness. At least here, she had a chance. As sleep finally claimed her, Emma's last thought was of Samuel's words, "Until you decide otherwise." She wondered what decision she could possibly make. Caught between two worlds that wanted nothing to do with her, saved by a man whose very existence challenged everything she'd been taught to believe, in her dreams. She was back in the barn, but this time when the shadow filled the doorway, she wasn't afraid. The morning sun beat down mercilessly on the Apache camp, and Emma woke with her dress soaked in sweat. Her body ached from the hard ground, despite the blankets, and her stomach cramped with hunger. Through the Wiki-Up's entrance, she could see the camp was already alive with activity. A shadow fell across the doorway. Mary Speak softly entered, carrying a bowl of something that smelled of corn and herbs. She set it down without ceremony, her face still cold. "Eat," she said curtly. "Then come. There's work." Emma struggled to sit up, her muscles protesting. The porridge was thick, flavored with something she couldn't identify, but she ate gratefully. When she emerged from the Wiki-Up, the full force of the desert sun hit her like a physical blow. Several women were gathered near the stream, washing clothes and preparing hides. They looked up at her approach, their chatter dying. "She needs proper clothes," an older woman said in English, eyeing Emma's tattered dress with disgust. "That rag will fall apart." Mary translated rapid instructions, then thrust a bundle at Emma. "Change, then we'll see if white women can work." The dress was simple buckskin, soft and well-made. Emma changed behind a cluster of rocks, feeling strange in the unfamiliar garment, but grateful to be out of her filthy dress. When she returned, one of the younger women giggled, quickly silenced by an elder's sharp look. "Now," Mary said, kneeling by the stream, "you wash like this." She demonstrated the technique, using stones to pound dirt from cloth, then rinsing in the cold water. Emma knelt beside her, plunging her hands into the stream. The water was ice cold despite the heat, shocking her fully awake. She tried to copy Mary's movements, but her soft hands quickly reddened against the rough stones. No, another woman, older and kinder-faced, corrected her. "Gentle but firm, like this." She guided Emma's hands, showing her the rhythm. The work was hard, harder than anything Emma had done before. By midday, her back screamed, her hands were raw, and the sun had burned her fair skin despite the shelter of cottonwoods along the stream. Some women took pity on her, offering advice or wordlessly correcting her technique. Others watched with barely concealed satisfaction as she struggled. "Look at her hands," one young woman said in Apache, not knowing Emma had begun to pick up a few words. soft as a baby's. She won't last a week." During a brief rest, Emma watched the women work together, noticed their easy companionship, their shared laughter. She'd never had this, even in her old life. Her mother had kept her isolated. Proper, preparing her for a marriage that never came because no decent man wanted a penniless orphan. "You," a young warrior approached, perhaps 18 or 19, with bold features and mocking eyes. "White woman, you shouldn't be here." Emma kept her eyes down, remembering her mother's lessons about avoiding confrontation. But that was the white world. She didn't know the rules here. "Joseph Wildhorse," Mary hissed. "Leave her be," Samuel said. "Samuel's not here," Joseph interrupted, circling Emma like a predator. "Gone hunting with the men. Can't protect his pet all the time." 2 other young men joined him, laughing. One kicked dirt at Emma's washing pile, muddying the clean clothes. The women tensed, but none intervened. This was men's business, apparently. "Maybe she's a spy," Joseph continued, switching to English for her benefit. "Maybe she'll run back to her people. Tell them where we are." "I won't," Emma said quietly, continuing to wash despite her shaking hands. "I have no people to run to. All whites have people. They stick together against us. Always." His voice was bitter, personal. "My brother died because of white lies. Shot for stealing horses he never touched." Emma looked up then, meeting his angry gaze. "I'm sorry about your brother, but I didn't kill him. I'm just trying to survive." Joseph's face darkened. He grabbed the basket of clean clothes, making as if to dump them in the dirt. But a hand caught his wrist. Rebecca Crowfeather, Samuel's aunt, had appeared like a ghost. She spoke sharply in Apache, and though Emma couldn't understand the words, the tone was clear. Joseph argued back, but Rebecca's voice rose, commanding. Finally, he dropped the basket and stalked away, his friends trailing behind. Rebecca turned to Emma, her expression unreadable. "You bring trouble, as I said, but—" She paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "Samuel saved my son once, carried him 20 miles with a broken leg. I owe him a debt." She pointed at the washing. "Work harder. Prove you're not useless." As the day wore on, Emma pushed through exhaustion and pain. When the sun reached its peak, the women moved to shade, working on other tasks, grinding corn, repairing clothes, weaving baskets. Emma was given the simplest jobs, things even children could do, but she applied herself with determination. A little girl, perhaps 6 years old, approached shyly. She had Samuel's strong features softened by youth, and Emma wondered if she was related to him. The child held out a clay cup of water. "Thank you," Emma said, drinking gratefully. The girl smiled and scampered away, but returned minutes later with something else, a smooth stone, pretty and pink. She pressed it into Emma's raw palm and ran away again before Emma could respond. "That's Samuel's niece, Grace Littledear," the kind-faced woman explained. "His sister's child. She lives with Rebecca now." The woman's face clouded. "Since the sickness took her mother." Emma looked at the stone, such a simple gift, and felt tears threaten. A child's kindness meant more than she could express. As afternoon shadows lengthened, the men returned from hunting. Emma saw Samuel's tall form among them, carrying part of a deer across his shoulders. His eyes found her immediately, taking in the buckskin dress, her sunburned face, her bandaged hands. Joseph Wildhorse intercepted him, gesturing angrily toward Emma. Samuel listened, his face impassive, then responded in a low voice that nevertheless carried authority. Joseph argued, but Samuel cut him off with a sharp gesture. When the young warrior stormed off, Samuel approached the women's work area. He surveyed Emma's pile of washing, smaller than the others. "Certainly, but completed." "You worked well," Mary Speak softly admitted grudgingly. "For a white woman." Samuel nodded, then addressed Emma. "You're tired. Come." She followed him to a cooking fire where the hunters were already preparing the deer. He cut a portion of meat and handed it to her, along with bread made from acorn flour. Emma ate slowly, aware of the eyes upon her, some curious, some hostile, some simply watchful. "Joseph troubles you," Samuel said. It wasn't a question. "He has reasons to hate," Emma replied carefully. "I understand." Samuel studied her. "Understanding and surviving are different things. Joseph is young, angry. His anger may fade, or it may not. Be careful." As night fell and the camp settled into evening routines, Emma helped clean up from the meal, her movements automatic despite her exhaustion. She was learning the rhythm of this place, the unspoken rules, the careful balance of work and rest, tradition and adaptation. Later, alone in the wickiup that still smelled faintly of its former occupant, Emma examined her hands by firelight, blistered, cut, already beginning to callous. Working hands, surviving hands, outside. She could hear singing, a low, beautiful sound that seemed to rise from the earth itself. She didn't understand the words, but the emotion was clear. Memory, mourning, hope, defiance, all woven together. Tomorrow would bring more work, more pain, more suspicious looks and small kindnesses. But she was alive. She was fed. She had shelter. And somewhere in this camp of strangers, she had one protector who saw her as Mary Connor had seen him, as a person worth saving. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had in that barn, more than she'd had in months. Emma Sullivan closed her eyes and let the Apache songs carry her toward sleep, toward another day of proving herself worthy of the chance Samuel Red Hawk had given her. The dust cloud appeared on the horizon just after dawn. 3 days later, Emma was drawing water from the stream when she heard the first shouts of alarm. Women grabbed children, men reached for weapons, and the entire camp transformed from peaceful morning routine to defensive readiness in moments. "White men," Mary Speak softly said, her face pale. "Soldiers, maybe, or settlers." She grabbed Emma's arm, her previous coldness replaced by fear. "They cannot find you here. You understand? They'll kill us all." Emma's blood ran cold. She'd been so focused on surviving day to day that she'd forgotten the danger her presence posed. If white men found her here, they'd assume she was a captive. The army would come. People would die. Samuel appeared at her side, his expression grim. "Come, quickly." He led her to a crevice in the rocks behind the camp, a hiding place invisible unless you knew where to look. "Stay here, no matter what you hear. Don't come out until I return." "Samuel, if they're looking for me." "They're not yet. These are settlers, passing through. But if they see you..." He didn't need to finish. "Stay hidden, stay quiet." Emma wedged herself into the narrow space, her heart pounding. Through a gap in the rocks, she could see the camp. The Apache had transformed it, making it appear smaller, less permanent. Children and women had disappeared into hiding spots. The men stood ready but not aggressive, projecting calm strength. 5 white men rode into the valley, armed and weather-beaten. Their leader, a man with cold gray eyes and a sheriff's star, surveyed the camp with obvious disgust. "Morning," he said, though his tone suggested anything but goodwill. "Name's Sheriff Watson. We're tracking Apache raiders. Stole horses from the Hendricks Ranch." Chief John Standing Bear, the elderly leader Emma had seen Samuel conferring with, stepped forward. His English was careful but clear. "No raiders here. We are peaceful. Have treaty papers." Watson spat tobacco juice dangerously close to the chief's feet. "Treaties ain't worth the paper they're written on when horses go missing. Mind if we look around? It wasn't a request." The white men dismounted, hands on their guns, and began searching the camp. Emma pressed herself deeper into the crevice as one man passed close to her hiding spot. So close she could smell the whiskey on him. "Hey, Sheriff," one of them called. "Found this." Emma's heart stopped. He was holding up her old dress, the tattered white garment she'd arrived in. Mary must not have burned it as she'd promised. Watson examined the dress, his eyes narrowing. Well, this don't look like Apache clothing to me." He turned to the chief. "You boys been collecting souvenirs, or you got a white woman here?" "A woman came," Standing Bear said calmly. 3 days ago. Sick, dying. We gave her food, water. She left. Left where? East, toward the settlements. Said she had family in Silver City. Watson clearly didn't believe him. Funny thing, we ain't heard nothing about a missing woman. But if one turns up missing, and we find out she's been here. He let the threat hang. Another man emerged from Samuel's dwelling. Found these, Sheriff, white woman's boots. Emma bit her lip to keep from gasping. Her boots, she'd forgotten about them, had been wearing moccasins Mary had given her. The tension in the camp ratcheted higher. Warriors shifted slightly, ready to fight if needed. Watson's men noticed, hands drifting to weapons. Now, Chief, Watson said, voice deceptively mild. You want to tell me again about this woman who left? Samuel stepped forward then, and Emma wanted to scream at him to stay back. I found her, he said, in Henry Wade's old barn, near death. Brought her here for Christian charity. Watson laughed, an ugly sound. Christian charity from heathens? That's rich. My mother was Christian. Samuel said quietly, taught by missionaries. She said we must help all people in need. Your mother should have taught you to stay away from white women. One of Watson's men sneered. The insult hung in the air like smoke. Samuel's jaw tightened, but he remained still. Chief Standing Bear placed a warning hand on his arm. The woman left. The chief repeated, We have no quarrel with you. Leave in peace. Watson studied them for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was worse than his scowl. Boys, I think these Apache are lying. And you know what? Even if they ain't, they got white woman's belongings. That's theft. Maybe we should take a few of them back to town. Ask them some questions proper-like. You have no authority here, Standing Bear said. This is reservation land. Reservation lines are mighty flexible when crimes are involved. Watson replied, So here's what's going to happen. You're going to hand over whoever brought that woman here, and we'll call it square. Otherwise. Otherwise what? Samuel asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Watson's hand moved to his gun. Otherwise, boy, we might have to search this camp real thorough. Might take all day. Might be some accidents. Emma couldn't let this happen. She started to move, but a hand clamped over her mouth. Rebecca Crowfeather had appeared beside her, silent as smoke. No, the older woman whispered fiercely. You come out now. They kill him for sure. Say he stole you. Stay. In the camp, the standoff continued. Warriors had surrounded the white men, not threatening but making it clear they were outnumbered. Watson's bravado faltered slightly. Listen, another of Watson's men said nervously. Maybe we should go. Ain't no woman here now, and the captain said not to start any Indian troubles without cause. Watson's face reddened. Shut up, Harris. But he was calculating odds, and they weren't in his favor. Fine, but we'll be back. And if we find out you're hiding something. He mounted his horse, pointing at Samuel. I'll remember you, boy. The giant Apache who likes to help white women. That's a story that'll spread. They rode out slowly, making a show of strength, but Emma could see their relief. As soon as they were out of sight, the camp erupted in heated discussion. Several people pointed at Samuel, voices raised in anger. Rebecca finally released Emma. Wait, not yet. It was another hour before Samuel came for her, his face troubled. It's safe now. Emma emerged on shaking legs. The camp looked at her differently now, not just with suspicion, but with fear. She was danger incarnate, proof that no amount of distance from white civilization could keep them safe. I should go, Emma said immediately. I'll leave tonight. Tell them I forced you to help me, that I— No. Samuel's voice was firm. That would only confirm their suspicions. Watson will have men watching the trails. Chief Standing Bear approached, his weathered face grave. You have brought trouble to us. Emma Sullivan. I'm sorry. I never meant— He held up a hand. Intentions matter little when consequences come calling. He looked between her and Samuel. The council will meet, decide what to do. As the chief walked away, Emma felt the weight of every stare. Children who'd begun to smile at her now hid behind their mothers. Women she'd worked beside turned away. "This is my fault," she whispered. "No," Samuel said. "This is the world's fault, the hatred between our peoples. But now," he sighed, "now you must prove you're worth the risk we take. The council will decide tonight. Until then, stay in the wiki-up. Rebecca will bring you food." Emma spent the day in isolation, listening to the camp's muted activities. As darkness fell, she could see the council fire burning bright, hear the rise and fall of voices in debate. Her fate was being decided by people she'd barely begun to know, people she'd put in danger simply by existing. When Samuel finally came for her, his face was unreadable. "The council has decided. You may stay, but there are conditions." Emma waited, hardly daring to breathe. "You must prove you are not a spy, that you will not betray us. And if the white men return," he paused, "if they return, you must be prepared to do whatever necessary to protect the camp, even if it means denying who you are, even if it means never leaving." "I understand," Emma said, though she wasn't sure she did. Samuel studied her in the firelight. "Do you? Because after tonight, Emma Sullivan might need to disappear forever. Can you do that? Become no one?" Emma thought of the barn, of the town that rejected her, of a life with no place in it for her. "I've been no one for a long time," she said quietly. "At least here, I'm no one with a purpose." Samuel nodded slowly. "Then tomorrow, your real test begins. Joseph Wildhorse and others demanded proof of loyalty. You'll have it." He turned to leave, then paused. "Watson won't forget, neither will we. Your choice to stay, it changes everything." As he disappeared into the darkness, Emma understood the weight of what had happened. She'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The Apache had risked everything to keep her secret. Now she had to prove worthy of that risk. In the distance, a coyote howled, and Emma shivered despite the warm night. Somewhere out there, Sheriff Watson was likely making his report, spreading his story about the giant Apache and the missing white woman. The threads of fate were drawing tighter, and Emma could only pray they wouldn't strangle them all. The rains came suddenly. 3 weeks after the council's decision, Emma had never seen desert storms like this. The sky turned black as coal. Lightning split the heavens, and water fell in sheets so thick she couldn't see 10 feet ahead. The usually dry arroyos became raging torrents within minutes. She was gathering firewood with Mary Speak softly when the first drops fell. They'd developed an uneasy working relationship since the incident with Watson. Not friendship, but mutual tolerance. "Run!" Mary shouted over the thunder. "Flash flood!" They sprinted toward higher ground, but the water came faster than Emma could have imagined. The peaceful stream that ran through the camp transformed into a monster, brown and roaring, carrying trees and debris like toys. Emma heard the scream before she saw the child. Little Grace Little Dear, Samuel's niece who had given her the pink stone, was caught on a rapidly disappearing island of sand in the middle of the torrent. She must have been playing by the stream when the flood hit. Without thinking, Emma plunged into the water. The current hit her like a fist, spinning her around, trying to drag her under. She fought against it, her body remembering the long-ago swimming lessons in a peaceful pond back east. Useless knowledge then. Life-saving now. "Emma, no!" Mary's voice was lost in the roar. The water was cold, brutal, full of branches that struck like clubs. Emma's dress tangled around her legs, and she kicked frantically, using every ounce of strength to push toward Grace. The child was screaming, clinging to a scraggly bush that was already half uprooted. Emma's fingers brushed Grace's arm. Missed. Tried again. The bush gave way just as she grabbed the girl, and they both went under. Water filled Emma's nose, mouth, lungs. She held Grace tight, kicking upward, breaking the surface just long enough to gasp air. They were being swept toward a narrow canyon where the water funneled into rapids. Death waited there, certain and violent. Emma grabbed at passing rocks, branches, anything. her free arm screaming with effort while the other held Grace. Then something struck the water beside them. A rope. Emma grabbed it with desperate strength, wrapping it around her wrist just as her muscles gave out. She felt herself being pulled, inch by agonizing inch, toward the bank. Strong hands hauled them out. Samuel's face appeared above her, rain streaming down his features, his expression fierce with fear. Other hands took Grace, and Emma heard Rebecca Crowfeather's voice, sharp with panic, calling the child's name. Emma coughed up what felt like half the river, her body shaking uncontrollably. Someone wrapped a blanket around her, and she realized she was sobbing, though whether from fear or relief she couldn't tell. "Grace?" she managed to ask. "Alive," Samuel said, his voice rough. "Because of you." The storm passed as quickly as it had come, leaving destruction in its wake. 3 wickiups had been washed away. Food stores ruined, carefully tended gardens destroyed, but no lives lost, a miracle that everyone attributed to Emma's quick action. Rebecca Crowfeather approached as Emma sat by a fire, trying to warm her frozen bones. The older woman's face was wet with tears, her usual stern composure shattered. "My granddaughter," she said simply, then pulled Emma into a fierce embrace. "My heart, you gave her back to me." The change in the camp was immediate and profound. Where before Emma had been tolerated, now she was seen. Women who had ignored her brought her food, new clothes, medicine for her scraped hands. Men nodded respectfully when she passed. Children, led by a recovered Grace, followed her with awestruck eyes. Joseph Wildhorse stood apart, his face troubled. When he finally approached, Emma tensed, expecting another confrontation. "I was wrong," he said quietly. A spy would not risk death for an Apache child. He held out something, a necklace of blue stones. "This was my sister's. She would want someone brave to wear it." Emma took it with trembling hands. "I'm not brave. I couldn't watch her die." "That," Joseph said, "is what courage is." As the camp worked to rebuild, Samuel found Emma sitting alone by the swollen stream, watching the water that had nearly killed them both. "You swim well for a town woman," he observed, settling beside her. Emma laughed, surprising herself. "My father insisted I learn, said a lady should be prepared for all situations. I thought he was foolish." Her smile faded. "I haven't thought about him in weeks. Is that wrong?" "The dead want us to live," Samuel said, "not drown in memory." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the wet rocks in shades of gold and crimson. Emma was acutely aware of his presence, the solid strength of him, the way he made her feel safe in this dangerous world. "The council meets again tonight," Samuel said eventually, "to discuss the flood damage. And you—" Emma's stomach clenched. "Me? What you did today. It changes things. Rebecca speaks for you now? Others too, but some still worry about Watson, about what comes next. What do you think?" Samuel turned to look at her fully. "I think the spirits brought you to that barn for a reason. And today, we saw part of that reason." He stood, offering his hand to help her up. "Come, you should eat before the council." That night, Emma was invited to sit at the council fire, not in the center to be judged, but as part of the circle. Chief Standing Bear spoke at length in Apache, and though Emma only caught scattered words, she heard her name mentioned with respect, not suspicion. Rebecca Crowfeather stood to speak, her voice carrying the authority of a clan mother. Mary Speak softly translated quietly for Emma. "She says you have Apache heart," Mary whispered, "that the water tested you and you proved worthy. She claims you as family." Emma's eyes filled with tears. Family. She'd been without one for so long. She'd forgotten what the word meant. The discussion continued, but the tone was different now. They spoke of practical matters, how to guard against Watson's return, how to integrate Emma more fully into the camp, how to explain her presence if questioned again. "You need Apache name," one elder suggested. "White name brings white trouble." Several suggestions were offered, debated. Finally, Samuel spoke, his deep voice cutting through the chatter. "Brave water woman," he said in English, then repeated it in Apache. "She who fights the flood." The council murmured approval. Chief Standing Bear nodded slowly. "It is good. From this night, Emma Sullivan sleeps in the past. Brave water woman wakes with the sun." As the fire burned low and the council dispersed, Emma, brave water woman, felt something shift inside her chest. Not just acceptance, but belonging. She'd earned her place through blood and courage, through risk and sacrifice. Samuel walked her back to her wickiup. At the entrance, he paused, seeming to wrestle with words. "What you did today," he began, then stopped, started again. "Grace is all Rebecca has left of my sister. To lose her would have broken something that could not be mended. Anyone would have—" "No." His voice was firm. "Not anyone. You." He reached out, his fingers barely brushing her cheek where a branch had left a scratch. "You could have let her go. No one would have blamed the white woman for not risking her life. But you jumped." The touch was feather-light, but Emma felt it like lightning. "She gave me a pink stone," she said softly. "Such a small kindness. How could I not try?" Samuel's hand dropped, but he didn't step back. "This changes things between us too," he said quietly. "You know this?" Emma's heart pounded. "Yes, it will not be easy. My people accept you now, but not all will accept more, and your people are not my people anymore." Emma finished. "I made that choice the night I followed you from the barn." Samuel smiled then, a rare, transformative expression that made him look years younger. "Sleep well, brave water woman. Tomorrow brings new challenges." As he disappeared into the darkness, Emma touched her cheek where his fingers had been. Through the wickiup smoke hole, she could see stars beginning to appear, brilliant against the rain-washed sky. The same stars she'd seen from the barn, but they looked different now. Kinder, perhaps. Or maybe she was the one who'd changed. She thought of Grace, safe in Rebecca's arms, of Joseph's necklace around her throat, of a new name that tasted like hope on her tongue. The flood had washed away more than gardens and shelters. It had washed away the last of Emma Sullivan, leaving brave water woman in her place, and for the first time since her parents died, she was glad to be alive. The attack came at dawn, 2 months after the flood. Emma woke to the thunder of hooves and the crack of rifle fire. She rolled from her blankets just as bullets tore through the wickiup's hide covering, showering her with splinters. "Get down!" Mary Speaks softly burst through the entrance. Grace clutched in her arms. "White men, many, through the torn wall." Emma could see them, at least 20 riders, Watson at their head, firing into the camp. But these weren't lawmen. Their faces were masked, their intentions clear. This was a raiding party, come for blood. Warriors poured from their dwellings, grabbing weapons, returning fire. Women and children ran for the caves in the canyon walls, their evacuation practiced and swift. Emma helped Mary with the children, her hands steady despite the chaos. "There," Watson's voice carried over the gunfire. "The white woman. I told you they had her." Emma's blood turned to ice. They'd come for her, and people were dying because of it. "Go!" Rebecca shoved her toward the caves. "Hide yourself." But Emma saw Samuel across the camp, pinned behind an overturned wagon, 3 riders closing in. Without thinking, she grabbed a rifle from a fallen warrior and ran not toward safety, but toward the fight. The weapon felt foreign in her hands, but her father had taught her to shoot rabbits back in Missouri. Different target, same principle. She dropped to one knee, sighted, squeezed the trigger. The lead rider tumbled from his horse. Samuel's head whipped around, his expression shocked. Emma was already moving, using cover, reloading with fingers that somehow remembered the motions. Another shot, another rider down. The third wheeled away, seeking easier prey. "You fool!" Samuel roared. But he was already moving too, using her covering fire to reach better position. The battle raged through the camp. Apache warriors used the terrain to their advantage, but the raiders had numbers and surprise. Emma saw Joseph Wildhorse go down, clutching his shoulder. She ran to him, dragging him to cover as bullets whined overhead. "Can't breathe!" Joseph gasped, blood seeping between his fingers. Emma tore strips from her dress, packing the wound. "Yes, you can. Stay with me." A shadow fell over them. Watson stood there, gun aimed at her head, his face twisted with righteous fury. "Apache-loving whore!" He spat. "You're coming with me. Going to show everyone what happens to race traders." Emma looked up at him. This man who represented everything she'd fled. "No." Watson's finger tightened on the trigger. "Then you'll die with these savages?" The shot was impossibly loud. Emma flinched, waiting for the pain. But Watson was the one who staggered, looking down in surprise at the arrow protruding from his chest. He fell forward, and Emma scrambled back. Samuel stood behind him, bow still raised, his face a mask of controlled fury. "You brought death to my people," he said to Watson's dying form. "Now death claims you." The raiders, seeing their leader fall, began to falter. Apache reinforcements arrived from a hunting party, and suddenly the attackers were outnumbered. The retreat turned into a rout, masked men fleeing into the desert, leaving their dead behind. As the dust settled, the cost became clear. 4 Apache warriors dead, including 1 elder. Joseph and 3 others wounded, wiki-ups burning, supplies destroyed, and all because of her. Emma knelt in the dirt, Watson's blood pooling near her knees, and felt the weight of it crushing her chest. "This is my fault," she whispered. "No." Samuel's hand gripped her shoulder. "This is hatred's fault, but you—" He gestured to Joseph, who was sitting up, alive because of her quick action. "You fought for us, killed for us." "She took 2 of them," someone said in Apache, and Emma realized it was one of the warriors who'd been most suspicious of her. "Fought like Apache, like family." Chief Standing Bear approached, his arm bleeding from a graze. He looked at Watson's body, then at Emma. "They came for you, but you stood with us. This changes everything." The cleanup was grim work. The dead raiders were stripped of weapons and supplies. The Apache waste nothing and buried without ceremony in a mass grave. The Apache dead were prepared for proper burial, their families keening with grief. Emma worked alongside the others, her hands steady now that action was required. She helped tend wounds, salvage what could be saved, comfort children who'd seen too much. When she caught sight of herself in a water bucket, she barely recognized the woman looking back, face streaked with dirt and blood, eyes hard with purpose. "You're one of them now." Emma turned to find a wounded raider, barely more than a boy, propped against a rock. Samuel and others stood nearby, deciding his fate. "Please," the boy begged her. "I'm white, like you. Tell them to let me go. I got family, a mother." "So did they," Emma said, gesturing to the Apache graves. "Mothers who'll never see their sons again because of what you did." "But you're white. You're supposed to—" "I'm Apache," Emma interrupted, the words feeling true in her bones. "Brave water woman of the Chiricahua. Your people made sure I can never be anything else." The boy's face crumpled. Chief Standing Bear ultimately decided to release him, a message to the settlements that the Apache wanted peace, but would defend themselves. As the boy limped away, Emma knew he'd carry stories of the white woman who'd chosen the Apache, who'd killed her own kind to defend them. As night fell, Samuel found her sitting alone by the stream, washing blood from her hands. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You could have hidden," he said quietly. "Could have let them take you. They might have called you a captive, let you return to their world." Emma laughed bitterly. "Return to what? To being nobody? To sleeping in barns and begging for work?" She looked at him directly. "I made my choice the day you asked why I was sleeping in that barn. Today just sealed it." Samuel's hand covered hers in the cold water. "The warriors speak of your courage. 2 enemies dead. Joseph's life saved. They say you have warrior's heart." I was terrified. Emma admitted. "But when I saw you in danger—" She stopped, heat rising in her cheeks despite the cool night. "I know," Samuel said softly. I felt the same when Watson pointed his gun at you, like my heart stopped. They sat in silence, hands linked beneath the water, both understanding what couldn't yet be spoken aloud. Around them, the camp rebuilt once again, resilient as the desert itself. But Emma knew this wasn't over. Watson was dead, but others would come. The story would spread. A white woman living willingly with the Apache, fighting against her own kind. "What happens now?" she asked. Samuel squeezed her hand. Now you are truly one of us. For better or worse. Brave water woman. The path back is closed." "Good," Emma said fiercely. "Let it be closed. Let them know I chose this." Later, as the camp settled for the night, Rebecca Crowfeather performed a ceremony, formally adopting Emma into her clan. The ritual was in Apache, but Emma understood the meaning as Rebecca painted symbols on her face, as the women sang, as Grace placed a crown of desert flowers on her head. She was no longer between worlds. The violence of the day had forced a choice, and she'd made it with bullets and blood. The other warriors looked at her differently now, not as a white woman living among them, but as a woman who'd proven her place with courage and sacrifice. But as Emma lay in her wickiup, she could still see Watson's face, still feel the rifle's kick against her shoulder. She'd killed today, crossed another line that couldn't be uncrossed, and somewhere out there, the survivors were spreading word of what had happened. The war between worlds had come to their camp, and Emma had chosen her side. Now she'd have to live with the consequences, and die with them, if necessary. Through the smoke hole, stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human struggles. But when Samuel's voice rose in a warrior's victory song, joined by others, Emma felt something fierce and protective rise in her chest. These were her people now. This was her family, and she would defend them to her last breath. The weeks following the raid brought an uneasy peace. The Apache doubled their sentries, moved camp twice, always watching the horizon for dust clouds that might herald another attack. But as Samuel slowly recovered from a bullet graze that had been worse than he'd let on, something else was growing between him and Emma, something that could no longer be ignored. Emma had taken to caring for him with a dedication that raised knowing looks among the women. She changed his bandages with gentle hands, brought him meals, sat with him during the long afternoons when the pain kept him restless. "You hover like a worried mother," Samuel said one evening, though his eyes were warm with something deeper than amusement. "Someone has to keep you from tearing your stitches," Emma replied, adjusting the poultice on his side. Her fingers lingered perhaps a moment too long on his skin, and she felt him tense beneath her touch. "Emma," he said quietly, catching her hand. "We need to speak of this." She knew what he meant. The unspoken thing between them had grown too large to ignore, fed by shared danger and quiet moments, by the way their eyes found each other across the camp, by the fierce protectiveness that had driven them both during the raid. "I know," she whispered. Samuel sat up despite her protests, his face serious in the firelight. "You understand what it would mean. You've already given up your world, but this would bind you to mine forever. There would be no place for us in white settlements. Our children would be caught between worlds." "Children," Emma repeated, the word making her heart race. "You've thought that far?" "I've thought of little else." Samuel admitted, "Since the night I found you in that barn, you've been in my mind like a song I can't forget. But I would not speak of it while you are finding your place here. Now." He touched the blue stone necklace at her throat, the one Joseph had given her. "Now you are Apache. Now I can ask, what is in your heart, brave water woman?" Emma felt tears sting her eyes. "You are," she said simply. "You have been since you asked why I was sleeping in the barn, since you saw me as human when no one else would." Samuel's hand curved around her face, thumb brushing away a tear. "Then be my wife, in the Apache way, in whatever way brings you peace. Be mine, and I will be yours, until the mountains crumble to dust." "Yes," Emma breathed. And then his lips were on hers, gentle but insistent. tasting of promise and forever. When they pulled apart, both breathing unsteadily, Samuel smiled, that rare, transformative expression that made him look young and hopeful. "I must speak to Chief Standing Bear, to Rebecca. There are traditions." "I know." Emma had learned enough of Apache customs to understand. "I'll wait." The next days passed in a blur of preparation. Once Samuel formally announced his intentions, the women descended on Emma with barely contained excitement. Even Mary, speak softly, once her harshest critic, helped prepare her for the ceremony. "You make him smile," Mary said, weaving flowers into Emma's hair. "I haven't seen him truly smile since his sister died. For that alone, you are welcome as family." Rebecca Crow-Feather took charge of arrangements with the efficiency of a general. "You have no family to negotiate for you," she said matter-of-factly. "So I will stand as your mother. Is this acceptable?" Emma hugged the older woman impulsively. "More than acceptable. You've been more mother to me than anyone since I lost mine." The ceremony took place at sunset, the sky painted in shades of rose and gold. Emma wore a dress Rebecca had made, soft doeskin decorated with beads and shells, more beautiful than anything she'd owned in her former life. Samuel waited for her by the central fire, resplendent in his finest clothes, looking every inch the warrior he was. Chief Standing Bear performed the ceremony, binding their hands with a cord woven from sweetgrass. The words were in Apache, but Samuel translated the important parts, his voice low and reverent. "Two paths become one path," he murmured. "Two hearts become one heart. What the spirits have brought together, no human can divide." When it was done, the camp erupted in celebration. There was dancing, singing, feast food saved for special occasions. Emma found herself pulled into circle dances, laughing as Apache women taught her the steps, as children threw flower petals, as warriors clapped Samuel on the back with good-natured jokes she was grateful not to fully understand. Joseph Wildhorse, still recovering from his wound, raised a cup in toast to brave water woman. He called out, "Who proved that courage knows no color," as the night deepened and the celebration continued. Samuel drew Emma away to a new wickiup that had been prepared for them. Inside, furs had been laid out, a small fire burned, and wedding gifts from the camp were arranged along the walls. Blankets, baskets, tools for building a life together. "My wife," Samuel said wonderingly, as if testing the words. "My husband," Emma replied, marveling at how right it felt. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Emma felt herself melt against him. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with desire, but also something deeper, a tenderness that made her heart ache. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small leather pouch. Inside was a ring, not gold or silver, but carved from turquoise, polished until it gleamed like captured sky. "It was my mother's," Samuel explained as he slipped it onto her finger. "She told me to give it to the woman who would walk the long path with me." Emma touched the ring reverently. "Tell me about her." So Samuel did. There in their marriage bed, stories flowing like water. He told her of his childhood, of learning to live in two worlds, of loss and survival, and the hope that had sustained him. Emma shared her own stories, the happy times before her parents died, the descent into poverty and desperation, the moment she decided to follow him from the barn. "I was so frightened," she admitted, "but also, it felt like fate, like my whole life had been leading me to that moment." "Perhaps it was," Samuel said, trailing his fingers down her arm. "The Apache believe that some souls are meant to find each other, no matter the obstacles." They came together then with a passion born of long restraint, of dangers survived and futures claimed. Outside, the celebration continued. But inside their private world, Emma discovered what it meant to truly belong to someone. Body, heart, and soul. Later, as they lay entwined, Samuel sleeping peacefully beside her, Emma stared up through the smoke hole at the stars. Tomorrow would bring its challenges. There might be more raids, more violence. The world outside would never accept what they'd built here. Their children, when they came, would face hardships she could only imagine. But tonight, she was simply a woman in love, held safe in the arms of a man who saw her truly. Tonight, she was brave water woman, wife of Samuel Red Hawk, member of the Chiricahua Apache, with a place and a purpose and a future. She thought of that desperate girl sleeping in the barn, alone and hopeless, and felt a fierce gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. Every hardship, every moment of fear, every choice that had seemed like disaster, all of it had led to this moment, this man, this life she could never have imagined. Samuel stirred in his sleep, pulling her closer, murmuring her Apache name like a prayer. Emma pressed a kiss to his shoulder and closed her eyes, letting the distant sounds of celebration lull her toward dreams. She had found her home at last, not in a place, but in a person. And whatever came next, they would face it together, two hearts beating as one, two paths merged into a single trail leading toward tomorrow. The transformation was complete. Emma Sullivan was gone forever, and in her place, brave water woman began her new life as wife, warrior, and bridge between worlds that were slowly, painfully, learning to coexist. In the distance, a night bird called, and another answered, a duet as old as the desert itself, as enduring as the love that had bloomed between two unlikely souls in a landscape of thorns and beauty. The seasons turned, painting the desert in different shades of beauty and hardship. Emma learned to read the subtle changes, the way certain cacti bloomed before the rains, how the bird songs shifted with the temperature, the patterns of stars that marked planting and harvesting times. 5 winters had passed since she'd followed Samuel from the barn, and her life had taken on rhythms she never could have imagined. She stood now at the edge of camp, one hand resting on her swollen belly where new life grew, watching the sunrise paint the canyon walls in shades of copper and gold. Their second child, their first, a son named Thomas Eaglefeather, played at her feet, chattering in a mixture of Apache and English that made her smile. "Mama, look!" He held up a lizard he'd caught, his father's dark eyes bright with pride. "Very good, little hunter." Emma praised in Apache, the language now as natural to her as breathing. But let him go now. All creatures deserve freedom. The boy released the lizard reluctantly, then scampered off to find his cousins. Emma watched him go, marveling at how easily he moved between worlds, accepted fully by the tribe in a way that had taken her years to achieve. "You should rest." Samuel's voice came from behind her, warm with concern. His arms encircled her from behind, hands gentle on her belly. The baby was restless last night. Like his father, Emma teased, leaning back against his solid strength, always moving, never still. Her father, Samuel corrected with a smile. Rebecca dreams of a granddaughter. They stood together, watching the camp come alive. So much had changed, yet some things remained constant. The threat from white settlements had lessened after Watson's death. Word had spread that these Apache would defend themselves fiercely, and that they had a white woman who'd chosen them, who'd fight alongside them. It had become a strange kind of protection, a story that made soldiers hesitate and settlers choose easier targets. But change was coming. They all felt it, like electricity before a storm. The railroad pushed ever westward, bringing more settlers, more soldiers, more pressure on the Apache to accept reservation life. Chief Standing Bear, growing frail with age, spoke often of difficult choices ahead. "Samuel," Joseph Wildhorse approached, fully recovered from his old wounds and now a respected war chief. "Riders coming. 3 men, white, but riding slow with a peace flag." Samuel tensed, immediately shifting into warrior mode. "Armed?" "Yes, but weapons sheathed. They're stopping at the usual parley spot." Emma felt her heart quicken. Peaceful or not, white visitors rarely brought good news. The 3 men waited at the designated meeting place, a flat area visible from the camp, but far enough away to prevent surprise attacks. Samuel, Joseph, and several warriors rode out to meet them, while Emma watched from the rocks above. her rifle ready despite her condition. She recognized one of the men, Judge Harrison from Silver City, known as a fair man who'd actually upheld Apache water rights in a recent dispute. The conversation was too distant to hear, but she could read body language, saw the moment when Samuel's shoulders tightened, when Joseph's hand moved toward his weapon before stilling. The meeting lasted an hour. When the white men rode away and Samuel returned, his face was grave. "What did they want?" Rebecca asked, voicing everyone's question. Samuel gathered the camp, waiting until all could hear. "The government offers a new treaty. We can keep this canyon, be recognized as a permanent settlement. Our children could attend the agency school if we choose, learn to read and write in English. They would provide some supplies, protection from raiders. In exchange for," Chief Standing Bear asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "We report to an agent, accept a census, allow inspectors, and—" Samuel's eyes found Emma's. "All white captives must be registered and given the choice to leave." A murmur ran through the camp. Emma stepped forward, Thomas clinging to her skirt. "I'm no captive," she said loudly in Apache. "This is my home, my family." "We know," Standing Bear said gently. "But they must hear it from you." The judge was respectful. "He knows your story, or parts of it. He offers to record your statement, make it legal that you choose to stay." "It's a trap," Joseph spat. "They catalog us like cattle, then use the lists against us later." "Perhaps," Standing Bear agreed. "But winter comes, and game grows scarce. The young ones need medicine when sickness strikes. We are strong, but we are few." He looked around at his people, elderly, adults, children, babies. "I am old. I think not of my pride, but of their futures." The debate raged for hours. Some wanted to fight, to retreat deeper into the mountains. Others, mostly those with young children, spoke of the benefits, medical care, education, a chance for their children to learn the white world's ways while keeping their own. That night, Emma and Samuel lay wakeful, Thomas sleeping between them. "What do you think?" Samuel asked quietly. "I think the world is changing whether we like it or not." Emma replied, "I think our children will need to walk in both worlds, as you have. But I also think—" She struggled for words. "I think sometimes bending is stronger than breaking." Samuel was quiet for a long time. "If we agree, you'll have to go to Silver City, stand before the judge, possibly face questions, scrutiny. They might try to force you to leave." "Let them try," Emma said fiercely. "I'll tell them exactly what I told that dying raider. I'm Apache, brave water woman of the Chiricahua. Your wife, mother of your children. This is my place." The decision came down to a vote, by a narrow margin. The camp chose to accept the treaty, not from weakness, but from wisdom, the recognition that survival sometimes meant adaptation. 2 weeks later, Emma rode into Silver City for the first time in 6 years. She wore her finest Apache dress, her hair braided in the traditional style. Thomas riding with Samuel while she rode her own horse despite her pregnancy. Warriors flanked them, a show of strength and protection. The town had grown. New buildings lined the streets, and people stopped to stare at the procession. Emma heard whispers, saw pointing fingers, but kept her head high. Judge Harrison's office was cool and dim after the bright sun. The judge, a thin man with kind eyes, gestured for her to sit. "Mrs. Redhawk, is it?" he began. "Brave water woman." Emma corrected, "Though yes, Samuel Redhawk is my husband." The judge made notes. "I need to ask, are you here of your own free will? Do you wish to remain with the Apache?" Emma looked him straight in the eye. "Judge Harrison, 6 years ago I was sleeping in a barn, starving, with no family, no future, no hope. Samuel Redhawk found me and offered me a chance at life, not as a captive, but as a human being deserving of dignity." She placed a protective hand on her belly. "I found family with the Apache, love, purpose, children who will grow up knowing both worlds, who might help bridge the gap between our peoples. So yes, I am here of my own free will, and I will remain with my husband's people, my people, until my last breath." The judge studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll record your statement. It should prevent any interference." He paused. "You know there are those who will never understand your choice. I stopped caring what they think the night I chose life over their approval." Emma replied. When they emerged from the office, a small crowd had gathered. Some faces showed curiosity, others hostility. One woman spat at Emma's feet, but as they mounted to leave, another woman, young, thin, with a hollow look Emma remembered too well, caught her eye. A question flickered there, desperate and hopeful. Emma held her gaze for a moment, then deliberately looked toward the desert, toward freedom. The young woman's eyes followed, understanding dawning. The ride back to camp was quiet, each lost in thought. As they crested the final ridge and saw their valley spread below, smoke rising from cook fires, children playing by the stream, home, Emma felt a peace settle over her. "No regrets?" Samuel asked softly. Emma looked at him, this man who'd saved her in every way a person could be saved. Thought of the life growing within her, of Thomas learning to hunt with his cousins, of the family that had claimed her when she'd had nothing. "None," she said firmly. "Not one." That night, as the camp celebrated the successful negotiation, Emma stood apart for a moment, remembering the frightened girl in the barn. That Emma Sullivan was gone, had been gone for years. In her place stood brave waterwoman, wife, mother, Apache. The journey had been hard, marked by violence and loss, prejudice and pain, but it had led her home. Samuel appeared at her side, as he always did when she needed him. "Come," he said, taking her hand. "The singers are starting, and Thomas wants his mother." Emma let him lead her back to the fire, back to their people, back to the life they'd built against all odds. The stars wheeled overhead, eternal and unchanging, witness to the love that had bloomed in the desert between two souls who'd found each other across an impossible divide. In the distance, coyotes sang their ancient songs, and Emma smiled. She was home. Thank you for listening to this story of love and survival in the Old West. Where are you enjoying this tale from? We'd love to hear from listeners around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Emma and Samuel's journey in the comments below. Your stories and reflections make our community special.